Thank you so much for being here. I'm delighted to present my job market paper, Inducing Positive Sorting Through Performance Pay, Experimental Evidence from Pakistani Schools. This paper is joint with Tahir Andrabi, who's at Pomona College. The motivation for this paper is that, in general, schools have a hard time identifying who is going to be a good teacher. The types of characteristics that are generally available to them just aren't great predictors of future performance. However, teachers might have private information about their own quality. And so it's possible that schools could use this private information to induce sorting of higher quality teachers into schools. The research questions we're going to test in this paper is, does performance pay induce positive sorting among teachers? So is this an effective type of contract to induce positive sorting? And if so, how much asymmetric information is there? So how much more do teachers know about their own quality than schools do? And then lastly, we'll try to understand what affects the magnitude of these sorting results. We're going to do this by conducting a two-phase experiment over a year and a half with nearly 250 schools, where we're going to first allow teachers to choose their contract and then randomize schools to offer performance versus flat pay contracts to teachers. The framework that we want to have in mind and kind of the key questions that we're going to be testing is thinking about a setting where a teacher chooses to work based on amenities and location, as well as their predictions about what wage they're going to receive at that job. And then schools will end up attracting different types of teachers based on their location, amenities, and most importantly, the type of contract that they offer. The model is going to have several key predictions. First, if teachers have private information about their own quality, then we should see performance pay resulting in sorting along two dimensions. First, along ability, so this is kind of the innate quality of the teacher in the absence of incentives, and along the teacher's effort response to incentives, so how much harder they work under incentive pay. And the magnitudes of these sorting effects will depend on how accurate teachers' beliefs are about their own quality and how much they care about non-wage aspects of the job. We're going to conduct this study in partnership with a large private school chain in Pakistan, and we're going to randomize schools to either a flat or a performance-based raise contract. And then we're going to measure outcomes all along the causal chain, from what information teachers and principals have to teachers' behavior inside and outside the classroom, and ultimately to student outcomes, both in terms of test score and non-test score outcomes. Jumping into the results, first, do higher ability teachers prefer performance pay when they're allowed to pick their contract? So this graph shows you the distribution of teacher quality in student standard deviations in blue for teachers who chose performance pay, or chose flat pay, excuse me, and in red for teachers who choose performance pay. So you see that the whole distribution is shifted over to the right, and on average, teachers who prefer performance pay have student test scores of about 0.05 standard deviations. Do we see sorting in response to these contracts that have been randomized across schools in phase 2 of the experiment? Well, this graph shows you at baseline, it looks like the schools are on average the same in terms of baseline value added, which we would expect. But a year later, we now see that there's more high value added teachers in schools that were assigned performance pay contracts and more low quality teachers in flat pay schools. Other margin of sorting we were interested in is behavioral response. So do teachers with a larger effort response to incentives, are they more likely to prefer performance pay? This first bar here shows you the average effect of being assigned a performance pay contract on end-line student test scores. But we can then split this by what type of contract the teacher said that they wanted in that first phase of the experiment where they got to choose. And we see that the effect of being assigned a performance pay contract is basically completely concentrated amongst the teachers who wanted that type of contract, suggesting that there's also sorting on behavioral response. Now, what is it that principals know about teacher quality? It looks like they have pretty limited information, though they do a better job at evaluating teachers on very observable aspects of effort. And for the better job for those who they've spent more time observing their classroom. Pulling these two sides together, this graph shows you how much of value added we can predict if we just use the information on the candidate CV of the candidate. The green line adds in controlling for the principal's evaluation of the teacher, and the orange line adds in controlling for the teacher's contract choice. So we can think of this gap here as the asymmetric information gap between what the school knows about teacher quality and what the teacher knows about their own quality. And importantly, we can control for other teacher preferences and show that it's not just risk aversion or competition preferences that are mediating these relationships for contract preference. We also find evidence that the more accurate information teachers have, the more sorting we see, and the lower switching costs there are, which we're able to randomly vary, the less sorting we see. We also find that teachers who prefer more performance pay are actually less likely to try to game the incentive scheme, and they have similar levels of contribution to school public goods. And using this information from the experiment, we're then able to extrapolate to what the effects of this policy would look like if it were scaled up to all schools. And we find that the effect of the policy is quite a bit larger than just the behavioral response. In fact, the sorting effects seem to be larger than the direct behavioral effect of performance pay if this policy were to be scaled up for a longer period of time. Thank you so much.